Hi, Shamara. So, just to answer your question, uh, there are actually more than two ways of doing this, but these are probably the most direct and easiest ways. There's more manual ways, like if you really want control over, where colors go specifically, there are more manual, but these are actually quite powerful ways to be able to create duotone colors. Now, this image here is pretty much a duotone as is, other than the skin color, because you've got like a red and a blue, which really stands out. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the best example. I could probably do this one's. So I've got a lot of pictures that are fairly kind of duotone in a way. So this one here, this one has like a blue, like an orange, and the white is a white. And again, you've got the skin color. But yeah, these are dramatically lit and are already pretty duotone color. But I'll show you the two different techniques with these two different images. Okay, so the one that you did, that's correct. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you said, you don't really have control on how those colors are mixed. Okay, so and that's part of creating a duotone using the technique that you did. But there's something that you've missed with that, and that's because it's just because the tutorials don't actually discuss that at all. And that's why I was planning to discuss that in session 2. So as per usual with this kind of image, you'd want to make it into a grayscale image first, and then you'd want to make it into a duotone. And you can see I've got monotone picked here, and I've got some weird color. Right, now the important thing here is that when you do duotone, that you pick a dark and a light color. You need contrasting colors, right? So let's just say that I want like a bluey, more backgroundy color, and I also want a reddy kind of color, right? So the first thing, of course, is to change this to a duotone. And so I'm going to choose my two colors. So I want this one to be, so the lighter color is going to be like a red. So we want it kind of bright red. As you start to get darker, then that becomes the dark color. So remember, you need contrasting colors, a light color and a dark color. Okay, so that's going to be Pantone 199C. So I'm using a spot color. Nothing wrong with using CMYK colors as well. So I could have instead chosen the color picker, and then from there maybe chosen a cyan as a magenta as a light color, right? For instance. So as long as you can see that under my figures here that I've only got magenta as the color, right? So 0 on everything else, and so that means that I've got only that one color as the color to use. And you can see that please don't rename, don't relabel these colors, don't call them pink or whatever, leave them as they are. That way when this is sent to a printer, they know that this is exactly magenta, or if it's a Pantone, they know it's exactly that color. Okay, so I could have that, and then I could choose from my color library, make sure that it's Pantone solid coated. You can also use Color Bridge. They're both the same, really. Color Bridge is just the latest version of your spots, right? So I want like a darkish blue, right? So, but I don't want it too dark. Maybe something like that. And so now, and this is where you ran into this problem, where you at the moment both colors are mixed evenly. So it's like a 50-50 mix, right? So they're mixed evenly, and that's why you get these colors. You don't get the direct colors that you're after. So if you want the direct colors, you need to experiment. Now, the important thing here is that the color that goes opposite, so the dark color usually has to stay. Can you see these lines that you see here? So they're going from bottom left to top right. Okay, so the blue, I would keep it like that. You can experiment with that. I'll show you how you can do that. The pink, I'd go opposite, so I'd go from top left to bottom right. And you can do that by clicking on this grid, right? By clicking on it, then you can play around with these, and you can create some pretty amazing effects as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go opposites with this. So I'm going to go like that, and you'll notice what happens. So now I want that blue, the darker area, to be the blue out here, and some of the lighter areas to be that red. And you can experiment with that. So I can drop that like that to make that lighter, or I can make it kind of darker, right? So a darker color, or I can usually, what a lot of people do is, sorry, I just made a mess there. You can, if you make a mistake, you can always pull them off like that. They experiment with an S curve to kind of create a little more contrast. Okay, so, but it depends on the effect that you're after, of course, right? So is that kind of the effect that you're after? Or no, I like it like that, right? So now I've got two distinctive areas that are different colors, and that's and you can do the same thing with this. I could play with an S curve with this maybe, just to bring up a bit more contrast, like that. So if I wanted it to, to be really dark with some light colors, or I can bring that down a little bit just to bring up some of that background, right? So these curves allow you to be able to have a little more control over what part receives those colors. So basically, in this case, what I'm saying is that the dark with the blue, the dark tones will receive this color because it's going up towards the dark tones. Whilst with this one, what I'm saying is that the light colors, because I've got most of the strength going up on the light colors, so the light colors will receive this magenta. Likewise, you don't need to use magenta. I'm just showing that as an example. I'm using only one out of the CMYK colors. But if you wanted to use two Pantone colors, that's fine by me. So say I want this kind of bright red, kind of pinky color. So I can do that as well. You don't need to use CMYK. I'm just saying that you can if you want to, but make sure that you only use one of those four colors. So now I'm stuck with two, and click OK. And so this is what I would use in InDesign as my artwork. Just remember though that you need to make sure that you save it as. Please don't save it as a JPEG or a PNG. I'm going to use the shortcut key actually, Control Shift S or Command Shift S if you've got a Mac. And I've got all sorts of experimentations here. So Duo demo. So I've got a bunch of demos out here. So the Duo demo's there, and if I go to InDesign now, and I've already created a template. There's something else that I'll be covering it in session 2 with you guys as well. So if I create new, I'll show you guys how to create a template. So I already have saved. Under saved, you can see that I've got a template there. I don't know why mine keeps changing to picas instead of millimeters, but I've got a preset already there. I'll click on create, and this isn't 100% correct either. The preset, it still needs to be adjusted. So I usually have templates. So that's not a template. So so if I went into, and I'll show you guys how to make templates as well. Finished art, and I've got a templates. So I created a templates folder, and these are all my, again, I keep showing students how to do them, so you can see I've got like a fair few templates there. Right, so this template actually has the right dimensions, unlike this is more of a starting file, so it's got even folds, which it shouldn't. It should have uneven folds. You can see the guides are set up correctly, and you've got your bleed and your slug set up. So I'll talk about this next session, and I'm going to place the where is it? So it was Cinderella Black Duo demo. There we go. And I'll just place it in here from bleed to bleed. There it is. Okay, and if you look at the colors, you'll notice that it's brought those, InDesign will bring those colors in, as you can see. So I've got those colors set up there. Okay, and if I was to go to my separations preview, you'll notice that they're there as well. So if I switch off the process colors, CMYK, you'll notice no changes. But if I switch these off, you'll notice that there are changes because it's only applying those two colors in there. Okay, so that's one way. In this case, you've got one file with Duotone. You have some control over what receives those colors, but not 100% control, right? So you'd have to do a fair bit of experimentation to get exactly what you want. If you want a little more control over what receives which color, there's another technique. So there's another way of doing this, right? So I'll close that. So let's just say this one. Say I want to convert this one to Duotone. What I'm going to do is the first thing we need to do is make sure that it's not RGB, because the images you bring in will be RGB. So if you want this technique, it needs to be first converted to CMYK. So I'm going to change this mode to CMYK. Sorry, the only issue with this is later on, if you're going to do this professionally, you need to know exactly which stock you're outputting this to. So I think I explained this kind of, really quickly before, and I'll get into this in a little more detail later on. When you do a CMYK transfer, you're actually being quite blind to what paper type you're sending this to. So remember that different papers will accept different amounts of ink. So this CMYK is for standard papers, right? If you were sending this, say, to a newspaper or a magazine, there's different ink weights that need to be set up. So you need to be a little more specific. But I'm just going to keep this simple for the moment. I might see if I can discuss this in session 2 with a little more detail, okay? But yeah, so basically if I was to go to it should be, so it's over here, it's all hidden. My color settings. Under my color settings, you'll notice that working spaces, that's when I go to image and convert. My working space at the moment is set to newspaper, so yours by default wouldn't be set to newspaper. Yours, this is probably because I showed some students how to do this. Yours most likely would be something like US web coded, or what was the other one? One of the web coded swap ones, I think it is. So paper 3 grade type coded swap. I think it's this one, US web coded stop v2. I think that's the default that you usually get, right? And so the problem with that, of course, is that's targeting a specific type of paper with a specific ink density. If you were just printing this as a standard stock on a brochure, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But if you were doing it on some kind of like uncoded stock, like, textured stock or something like that, then you would have to consider what kind of output you were doing your CMYK to. I'm going to just keep it at US web coded swap, okay, which again is, for your standard papers, offset printers papers out there. Usually works okay percentage wise, but later on we'll talk about targeting specific papers. Okay, so I'm going to go image mode and I'm going to say CMYK color. I'm going to convert it to that. Okay, so now it's been converted to CMYK, and you'll notice that I've got the channels, so you can access the channels through here. Channels, I've got the channels already accessible to me, and you can see that I've got CMYK plates there. Okay, right, so what I want to do now is I want to limit these CMYKs, these channels, okay, to basically to 2. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is go to image mode, and I'm going to change it to multi-channel. And you can see there's a slight change there, multi-channel, and the reason for that is that when you do multi-channels, actually usually it gets rid of the black, but it kept the black. Okay, so I can hide these channels, as you can see, and so what happens if we stick to just 2 colors in this case, right? So again, we've got cyan, magenta, and yellow. So if I remove black, then I'm left with 3 colors, right? And so what if I removed yellow, for instance, right? Now we're left with two colors. And so I'm going to remove yellow. And so we're left with two colors. Now, you don't have to stick, again, you don't have to stick with cyan and magenta. If I double click these, I can actually change them. So cyan, of course, being the bluey color. So I can change this to specifically a spot color, like a Pantone color. So I want it to be kind of like a darker blue, say, for instance. And click OK. Right, so now this is a Pantone. And then I want this one to be like an orangey color. So again, if I go and look at my colors here, so now I've got more of an orangey color and more of a bluey color, as you can see there. Okay, so we could do some adjustments as well. You'd have to do the adjustments per plate though. But yeah, so we've got pretty much what we want. And what I like about this though is that now you can actually paint what you want to have those colors as well. Okay, so what happens if I switch these plates? There's no real difference switching the plates. Okay, so just remember though, later on when you later on you're going to need to put it in design as two separate files, and this is what makes it a little bit more complicated. But let's just say, actually, I don't want orange. I'm going to change this to, that's the blue. I'm going to change this to more of a yellow, like more of a yellow orange. That's better, right? So more of a yellow color is what I want. Okay, so what happens if I make this a little bit brighter or darker? No, I think it's okay as is. Solidity, don't think that it makes that much of a change, to tell you the truth. Just leave it as 0, because then that way you're allowing the tone of the black and white. So if I hide this, you'll notice it's actually, those are the tones there to control the strength of that. Now, yeah, that one's the orange. So if I go to the orange plate, say I wanted these ballet shoes to stand out, so I want them to be that kind of orangey. Okay, so what I can do now is just using my standard brush and using black, I can go in and start painting in that orange. So this is what I really like about this, is that I can actually have a little more control over, you know, what has specific colors. Usually I use my stylus for this, but I'm just using a mouse, which means that I'm not super accurate with what I'm doing. But you can see what it's doing there. Now I've got, when I zoom in, I've got a pixel grid, which doesn't always help when it comes to painting. So I can actually, where are you, pixel grid? Switch that off so I don't get the pixel grid. Right, and so I want that painted as well, so that's kind of the orange color. And you'll notice that now has that orangey, so that stands out. Yeah, so with this, I have a little more control over what is what. But once you've done this, now InDesign doesn't accept multi-channel files, whether Photoshop or not. It just doesn't like them. But what you do instead is you split these, right? So once you're happy with what you've got, you can split the channels. And what that does is it separates the two files. And what I like about this is it actually keeps the Pantone numbers there, so we know exactly which Pantone numbers we used. From there, if you want a little more contrast with things, so this is obviously the orange because that's where I painted on the shoes, and this one here is the blue. Okay, so what I can do here is, if I wanted to, I should be able to add an adjustment layer, brightness and contrast. These are the only ones that I really want to do anyway, so that you can see some of these adjustment layers. They're to do with color, and there's no color, so that's why they're grayed out. So I'm going to do curves, and so with the curves, I can kind of create a little more contrast so that the backgrounds may be a little bit darker. Again, S-curves usually help with this kind of stuff, so that S-curves will allow you to have a lot more contrast with things. So that way, the dark bits will receive that blue and the lighter bits will not. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I want to do is it should actually maintain that in Photoshop. So if it is a grey, so if now what I want to do is save this, and I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. So make sure you save it as a Photoshop file. So J Cinderella, I don't have anything else named that way. No, so I'm going to save that. Click OK, and then I'm going to do the same with this one. Click save. Okay, so they're both in. They should both be in there. So I'll get rid of this. So we know that works. And just before I bring that stuff in, usually even if you get rid of images, it'll maintain the colors that you've got. So I don't want those colors. I'm going to get rid of them. Okay, so I'm going to place. So it's J Cinderella, Pantone, blah, 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 and that one. So I want to place both of those. I'm going to place one at a time because I'm going to need to resize and position them. So I'll open this one first. And so the pain of this is that if you bring them in at 100%, obviously they're going to be much bigger than you need them to be, unless you resize them to suit. Okay, so but what I do usually is I make sure that they're snapped in the right position like that, and so I'll bring in the next one, J, which is this one here, I think 288, and make sure that so I'll make sure these are aligned. So you can actually use the align tool as well to make sure they're aligned at the top left hand corner, and so they need to be perfectly aligned or else this won't work. Okay. Now, the dark should be underneath the light, and I've got it the other way around. So I'm going to send this one. And I know this is the dark because this is the, it's darker plate. It's got you can see that that's lighter there. So that's the blue that I changed the contrast for. So I'm going to arrange center back. I usually use shortcuts, but I'm just for your benefit, I'm not. Right, so I'm going to send it to the back, and in this case I have to use shortcuts in order to resize both at the same time and resize them proportionally. So if I select the two and just start resizing like this, it's just going to crop them. Okay, so it's not going to resize them properly. So what I need to do is I need to hold down the control key for PC, for Mac it's the command key first. Then I need to hold down the shift key. So the control or the command key is to resize the image with the box, as you can see. So it resizes the image with the box. And the shift key constrains proportion so that it scales evenly. So basically, rather than stretching and squashing, it's going to scale it the way you want. So I'm just going to do it to there, right? Now that I've done that, so this is going to look really weird, and it will look weird until you output or you test it, okay? So at the moment, they come in as black plates, just grey. So what you can do now though is you can assign colors to these. Now this is tricky, and if you do it wrong, it's not going to work. Okay, so there is a difference between the frame that holds that image and the image itself. So at the moment, you'll notice there's no color assigned to the frame, right? So the frame has no color. So the frame, of course, is this thing here, right? So this is the frame that's holding the image, and I can give the frame color and it will give it a solid color. We don't want that. What we want is to give this picture in here, the picture inside of the frame, a color, right? So there's a difference, and you'll notice that when I click on the little circle, it actually picks a picture inside of the frame, and you'll notice that I have a black fill because it's the picture that's inside that has that color. Okay, so once I've done that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my swatches panel, and I'm going to create a new swatch. Okay, so now I haven't kept account of the colors here. So the blue one is 288, right? So it's the lighter one that I've got at the moment. Now it probably is, before I move on, it's probably a good idea to separate these into two separate layers. Okay, so I'm going to click away, I'm going to select the frame, create a new layer, and I'm going to make sure that that is on layer 2, like that. Right, so I can click, hold, and drag the little box up to the next layer, and you can see that now I've got the two in two separate layers. And again, just to help me out, what I'm going to do is the lighter one is 151, Pantone 151C, coated stock, and the darker one is 288C, Pantone 288C. Okay, so now I've got those separated into separate layers. Okay, and that just makes it easy for me to maintain them. And you know, if I want to switch to that one to change the color on that one, it's easier. Right, so I'm going to click on the circle to pick the image itself. So always double check. If you haven't picked the image, if you picked the frame, it's got no color assigned to it, which means you've picked the wrong thing. Pick the circle to pick the image. Or even if you double click somewhere, you still do the same thing. But make sure that you're picking the image, not the frame. If you pick the frame, then you've got problems later on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go into my swatches, and I'm going to create holding down the Option or the Alt key. I'm going to create a new swatch, and then from there, of course, I'm going to change this to Spot. And on my drop-down menu, I'm going to choose. So we've got bridge there as well. So I've got the color bridge coated stock, and here we can search for that color. So unlike Photoshop, which you kind of can't, it's a bit of a pain, but you type in the numbers quickly and it finds those numbers. Actually, again, crap, I forgot the numbers. So the lighter one is 151C, so 151. So there it is. So it says CP there because that's the color bridge version, but it's still C. Okay, so click OK. So now I've got that color assigned to that portion, the lighter portion. And if I click away, if I click here, there's no color assigned to the frame. There's only a color assigned to the picture. Okay, so that's good. So next, I'm going to hide that and grab the next picture. So 288C. So if I click on that, make sure that it's the black. And again, the same thing, I'm going to create holding down the Alt or Option key. I'm going to create a new swatch. You don't actually necessarily need to change it to Spot because it does it automatically if you go to, say, colored bridge coded. Actually, no, it's going to process. Okay, I'll make sure, let's just make sure that it's a spot color. And we want, 288. 288. There you go, so there's 288, click OK. And so now 288 has been assigned to that. Now, by default, you will not see the mixture of those two. So you'll just see this. And so when you're working on the file, don't worry about it. Just make sure you set it up first and then lock those layers or something so you're not accidentally moving them. Okay, so yeah, I would lock those layers like that. Actually, I'm not going to lock them yet because there's one more setup that I need to do. I need these two to work together. So at the moment, they're not going to work together. One's going to knock the other one out. It's called knockout, and we'll talk about that in more detail later on. So if you want them to work together, to mix together, they need to overprint. In fact, only one needs to overprint. The color that's above needs to overprint on the color that's below. In order to do that, I have this thing called the Attributes panel. Now you can find that under Window, Output, and Attributes. Okay. Again, make sure that you're only picking, actually in this case, if you pick the frame, it should be okay. So pick the frame, it won't let me. So pick the picture and then hit overprint. Overprint fill. Now mine's turning out, but only because I've got the separations on. But if I don't have that on, you'll notice it doesn't do that. Okay, so that picture has now been set to overprint. And if I want to see it, the only way to see it is to switch on separations. And then you'll see it, because this effect only works in offset printing. It's not going to work on digital printing, so you wouldn't do this for digital printing. So if you're going to do a digital print test, it's not going to work. Okay, this will only work on offset. And you'll notice that it's pretty much what I wanted. So I've got that kind of greeny blue color in the background, and I've got the orangey happening where I want it to happen. Okay, so that's another technique. You can see that this one's a little bit more complicated, and it does take practice. It took me practice when I was, first learning this kind of stuff. So you might get it wrong a couple of times, but keep persisting at it if it doesn't work out. And you can always ask me questions if there's any issues. All right, so that's the end of my two Duotone setups. Hopefully that's helped you to understand how you can have a little more control over those colors.